smashed the door. To her, this was our son's apartment. My mother arrived at dawn with Dad and brother to invade my residence. The one-eyed expelled them from yesterday after shaming me before the entire family, crowbar in hand. I suddenly flung open the door. What they glimpsed in my grip made them shriek in horror. Can you imagine waking up to your mother's furious screams, demanding your father and brother break down your apartment door because they think it's their son's apartment, all because you dared to finally claim a life of your own? I'm Jelena, and that was my terrifying reality this morning. I was standing just inside, my hands still shaking from the humiliation they'd put me through yesterday, listening to every single word. And what they saw in my hands when I finally flung that door open, well, let's just say it made them scream in horror. To understand how we got to that point, how my family could go from supposedly loving me to trying to break into my home, you need to know about the people who raised me. And trust me, it's quite a story. My father, George Williams, built this massive insurance business from nothing. And honestly, his drive, his work ethic, they could have been admirable. But they came packaged with this absolutely unbending belief that he knew what was best for everyone in his world. Questioning him? That was a direct challenge, an affront to his authority. He planned our lives with the same ruthless precision he used to build his empire, leaving zero room for our individual dreams, our own desires. Then there was my mother, Evelyn. Oh, she perfected the art of passive aggression. She'd never directly oppose my father, no. Instead, she wielded guilt and emotional manipulation with surgical precision. I just want what's best for you, she'd coo, right after she'd systematically undermined all my confidence. And her absolute favorite line, when I dared to object to anything: "One day, you'll thank us for this." Well, Mom, I'm still waiting. And Nathan, my older brother, the golden child who could do no wrong. He mirrored my father in every single way, from his shiny business degree to his utterly condescending attitude toward me. Dad controlled with direct commands, but Nathan? He used mockery and dismissal. "Don't be so dramatic, Jelena," that became his infuriating catchphrase every time I dared to express a genuine feeling. Status, you see, meant everything to my parents. Our family's reputation in the community was carefully cultivated, like the prize roses in our front yard. My mother volunteered for every church committee. My father donated generously to local charities. And we all had to look and act perfect in public. The pressure? It was suffocating. My education wasn't about learning, it was purely about achievement that reflected well on them. When I dared to show artistic talent in high school, my parents just flat out dismissed it as a hobby. "Art won't pay the bills," my father declared, shutting down my dreams completely before steering me firmly toward business school. And like a good, obedient daughter, I dutifully enrolled in the marketing program at the university they selected, abandoning my real passion, my art. Even my appearance wasn't my own. My mother scheduled my haircuts, selected my clothes, and constantly criticized my weight. "No one will take you seriously looking like that," she would say if I chose an outfit she disapproved of. By 20, I had lost all sense of my own style, my own preferences. My parents had carved me into their ideal image. Dating? Another battlefield. Any guy I brought home faced an interrogation from my father about his family background, his career prospects. Nathan would then swoop in later to tell me why that one wasn't good enough for our family. My first serious college boyfriend, Daniel? He was deemed unsuitable because his parents were teachers, not professionals. Months of subtle sabotage from my parents eventually just broke us. And money? Oh, the control extended to my finances too. They paid for my education, but they never let me forget it. "We invest in your future because we love you," they'd say, but that investment came with so many strings attached. They insisted on access to my bank accounts well into my 20s. Every single purchase was scrutinized, judged. It was exhausting. My first real attempt at independence came after college. I landed a marketing job at a small firm, rather than joining my father's company as everyone expected. The fallout? It was immediate. "After all we've done for you," my mother wailed over the phone, laying on the guilt thick. My father was more direct. "You're making a mistake that will cost you your future." For weeks, family dinners weren't family dinners. They were tribunals where my career choice was dissected, analyzed, criticized. Nathan, of course, joined in, explaining how I was throwing away our family's connections and security. Their united front just wore me down. 6 months later, I resigned. And I took a position at my father's company. I felt defeated. This pattern, this heartbreaking cycle, it went on for years. Every single attempt to establish independence was met with crushing resistance. Want to take a vacation alone? Suddenly, my mother had health concerns that required my presence. Mention moving out? My father would pull up spreadsheets, meticulously demonstrating why it made more financial sense to continue living at home. By 30, I was trapped. I was living in my childhood bedroom, working for my father, feeling like a teenager even though I was an adult. I had savings I was terrified to use, dreams I was too afraid to pursue. On the outside, my life looked perfect, successful. But inside, it was utterly, completely empty. My college friends were building lives, careers they chose, marriages, children. And me? I had financial security, yes. But I had absolutely no freedom. No life of my own. The turning point, the moment everything shifted, happened in a therapy session I secretly started attending. Dr. Tuda Morris, my therapist, asked me a simple question, one that echoed in my soul and changed everything. Whose life are you living, Jelena? I had no answer. Because in that moment, I realized the crushing truth. I was living my parents' vision for my life, not my own. Not mine. That question haunted me for weeks. It burrowed deep. Until finally, I made the decision. The big one. I was moving out. At 31, I was going to have my own place for the first time, no matter the consequences. I found an apartment, signed the lease without telling my family, and then I braced myself for the inevitable storm. Finding my apartment felt like falling in love. It wasn't some fancy, perfect place by conventional standards. Just a one-bedroom walk-up in an older building, creaky floors, slightly outdated appliances. But the large windows? They flooded the living room with natural light, perfect for my long-abandoned painting. The built-in bookshelves could finally display all the books my parents considered wastes of time. And that small balcony overlooking a quiet courtyard? A peaceful retreat, just for me. Most importantly, it was mine. I signed the lease on a Tuesday. The following Sunday, at our mandatory family dinner, I dropped the bomb. Their reaction? Exactly what I expected, yet still crushing. My father put down his fork with deliberate slowness. An apartment at those prices? That's financially irresponsible, Jelena. My mother's eyes immediately filled with tears. But why would you want to leave home? Don't we take good care of you? Nathan scoffed. Is this another one of your independence phases? Remember when you wanted to study abroad in college? I had prepared for this, truly. But still, my resolve wavered. That's when Dr. Morris's words about setting boundaries echoed in my head. I took a deep breath. I've signed the lease. I move in next week. I'd love your support, but I'm doing this regardless. A quiet, firm declaration that felt monumental. The initial shock wore off, giving way to what I call their helping phase. If they couldn't prevent my independence, they would just control it instead. My father offered to help with rent. I politely declined. My mother insisted on coming furniture shopping, subtly steering me toward pieces that matched their home, not my taste. Nathan volunteered to handle the move, trying to schedule it around his convenience, not mine. But I moved in, despite their interference. And that first night alone in my new place? I was both terrified and utterly exhilarated. I ordered takeout my mother would have never approved of, sat on the floor because my furniture hadn't arrived, and cried tears of pure, unadulterated relief. That night, I slept better than I had in years. The peaceful feeling lasted exactly 3 days. Then my parents showed up unannounced, bearing housewarming gifts and, of course, their unsolicited opinions. My mother walked through the apartment, running her finger over surfaces, checking for dust, rearranging the few decorations I'd placed. My father measured the windows, declaring he'd order proper blinds to replace the ones that came with the apartment. You need to give us a key, Jelena, my father announced as they were leaving. For emergencies. I reluctantly agreed, rationalizing that it might ease their anxiety. What I didn't expect was their definition of emergency. My mother started dropping by while I was at work, leaving home-cooked meals, cleaning. I'd come home to find my laundry folded, my bed made differently, things moved to where she thought they belonged. My father used his key to let in maintenance people he hired without consulting me, resulting in new light fixtures I hadn't chosen and definitely didn't want. But the most invasive incident? I returned home early with a migraine, only to find my parents and Nathan in my apartment with an interior designer. They had measurement tools and fabric swatches spread all over my living room. "Surprise," my mother chirped, completely oblivious to my shock. "We're giving your apartment a proper makeover. This designer did the Henderson's Lake house." The designer looked so uncomfortable as I struggled to maintain my composure. "I didn't ask for a makeover. This is my home, and I like it as it is." My father waved away my objection. "You don't know what good design is, honey. Let the professionals handle this." That evening, after they left, I sat in my living room, feeling utterly violated. They had entered my sacred space without permission, making decisions about my home without my consent. The parallels to how they had always treated my life choices were just impossible to ignore. It was my neighbor Olivia who helped me see clearly. We met in the hallway, and over a thank-you cup of coffee, I found myself pouring out the story of my family's surprise redecorating committee. Olivia, a social worker 10 years my senior, listened without judgment. Then she said, "Jelena, what you're describing sounds like they don't respect your boundaries. Having a key doesn't mean they can come in whenever they want." I heard myself automatically repeat the excuse I'd used for years. "They're just trying to help." Olivia's response was a revelation. "Is it helping if it makes you uncomfortable in your own home? Help should make your life better, not make you feel invaded." That conversation was another turning point. The very next day, I changed the locks on my apartment door. I didn't tell my family immediately. I knew the confrontation would be intense. Instead, I used the time to prepare myself emotionally with Dr. Morris's guidance. "Setting boundaries isn't about punishing them," she explained. "It's about protecting yourself and establishing healthy relationships." "But what if they never accept my boundaries?" I asked, voicing my deepest fear. "Then you'll have information about what kind of relationship is possible with them," she said. Not everyone can adapt to healthy boundaries, especially if they're used to control. The inevitable confrontation came when my mother tried to let herself in while I was home and found her key didn't work. Her confused jiggling of the door handle was followed by knocking. When I opened the door, her expression shifted from confusion to hurt. "My key doesn't work, Jelena. Is something wrong with your lock?" I took a deep, fortifying breath. "I changed the locks, Mom. I should have told you, but I needed to make a point. You and Dad have been coming in without my permission, and that needs to stop." The hurt in her eyes was quickly replaced by indignant anger. "Without permission? We're your parents. We don't need permission to look after our daughter." "I'm 32 years old, Mom. I don't need looking after. And yes, you do need permission to enter my home." That conversation initiated a cold war that lasted weeks. Their calls became less frequent, though Nathan took up the mantle, trying to convince me I was overreacting. "They're just trying to make your place livable," he'd say. "You've always been so sensitive." Despite the tension, I held my ground. Each day in my apartment became a small victory for my independence. I painted the living room a soft blue, a color my mother would absolutely hate. I bought eclectic furniture from thrift stores, ignoring the high-end retailers my parents preferred. I hung my own artwork on the walls, pieces I'd created in secret over the years, finally out in the open. My confidence grew alongside my sense of personal style. I started reconnecting with college friends, people I'd lost touch with during my years of family-enforced isolation. I joined a local art class, painting regularly again. I even started dating without running potential partners through my family's approval system. 6 months into my independent life, I felt like a different person. My apartment had become a true reflection of who I was, not who my family wanted me to be. The only shadow was this building tension with my family, escalating toward an explosion no one, not even me, could have predicted. Aunt Patricia's 60th birthday celebration had been marked on the family calendar for months. My mother's only sister, she held a special place, and her milestone birthday meant a gathering of the entire extended family. Normally, I would have dreaded it, knowing it meant hours of performative family harmony. But after 6 months of true independence, I felt stronger, more capable of navigating their dynamics without losing myself. I chose my outfit carefully that morning, a navy blue dress that was professional, yet expressed my personal style. I wore jewelry I'd bought, not the pearls my mother insisted were the only appropriate accessory. I drove to Aunt Patricia's, nervous, yes, but determined to maintain my boundaries. The first hour went surprisingly well. I reconnected with cousins I genuinely enjoyed. Cousin Sophia commented on how happy I looked. Uncle David asked about my apartment with genuine interest, not judgment. Even Aunt Patricia noticed the change, pulling me aside to say, "There's something different about you, Jelina. You seem lighter." I began to relax, thinking my fears were overblown. Maybe, just maybe, my family could accept the new, more independent me. That hope died quickly. My father clinked his glass to gather everyone's attention during lunch. "While we're all together," he announced, with the absolute confidence of someone who always controls the room, "I wanted to share some exciting news about Jelina's apartment." My body went cold. All eyes turned toward me. I had no idea what he was about to say, and that alone was alarming. "Evelyn and I have decided to give Jelina's apartment a complete renovation as a surprise." He beamed, as if announcing he'd cured cancer. "We've hired Wilson Designs, the same firm that did the Johnson's Lake House." My mother jumped in enthusiastically. "We've already ordered new furniture, and the painters start Monday. Wait until you see the plans." She pulled out her phone and started showing photos to nearby relatives. With growing horror, I realized she was showing pictures of my apartment. Photos taken without my knowledge during their unannounced visits. My private space, displayed for the entire family to evaluate and critique. "The current furniture is so eclectic," my mother continued diplomatically, which everyone recognized as her code for cheap and tasteless. Nathan added helpfully, "Jelina's always had unique taste. Remember her purple hair phase in high school?" The family laughed. And I felt like I was 16 again, my choices being mocked as immature phases rather than expressions of my identity. Something snapped. "I haven't agreed to any renovation," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "This is the first I'm hearing about it." My father waved away my comment as if swatting a fly. "It's a surprise, honey. That's why we didn't tell you." "A surprise implies something the person would want," I retorted, feeling my carefully constructed composure cracking. "I don't want strangers in my apartment making changes I haven't approved." The table grew quiet. The tension was palpable. My mother's smile remained fixed, but her eyes hardened. "Jelina, this isn't the time or place to discuss this. You brought it up in front of everyone." I pointed out. "When would be a better time to discuss changes to my home than when you announced them publicly?" My father's expression shifted to the stern look I knew so well, the one that had silenced me countless times growing up. "We're trying to help you create a proper living space. The apartment looks like a college dorm room." "It looks like me," I said, my voice growing stronger, a new fire igniting inside. "It reflects who I am, not who you want me to be." Aunt Patricia tried to diffuse the tension. "The cake is ready. Shall we move to the living room?" But something had broken open inside me. Years of suppressed feelings finally finding their voice. "I changed the locks for a reason. I don't want you coming into my space without permission. And I certainly don't want you renovating it without my consent." The shocked silence around the table was deafening. It made me realize how rarely anyone ever contradicted my father in public. My cousins studied their plates with sudden fascination. Uncle David cleared his throat uncomfortably. My mother's voice was tight with controlled anger. "Jelina, you're making a scene at your aunt's birthday. I'm not the one who brought up renovating someone else's home without their permission," I shot back. Nathan jumped in, his tone condescending. "Typical Jelina drama. They're trying to help you, and you're acting like they committed a crime." "Entering someone's home without permission is a crime," I said. "It's called breaking and entering." My father stood up, his face flushed with anger. "That's enough. We have never broken into your apartment. We had a key. A key I never should have given you, I countered, standing now, 2 years of therapy finally giving me the strength to hold my ground. Because you abuse the privilege. My apartment is my space, not an extension of your house, not a project for you to fix. Aunt Patricia intervened, her voice gentle but firm. George, Evelyn, perhaps this is a discussion for another time. My father nodded stiffly, his jaw clenched in barely controlled fury. Of course, Patricia. I apologize for the disruption. The conversation shifted to safer topics, but the damage was done. I felt the weight of disapproving glances from relatives who believed I had disrespected my parents. Others gave me subtle nods of support or looks of pure sympathy. The family had witnessed something rarely seen in our carefully controlled public image: authentic, raw conflict. I stayed through the cake cutting, wanting to avoid any further disruption to Aunt Patricia's day. But the joy had gone out of it for me. As I prepared to leave, my mother cornered me in the hallway. "We'll discuss this at your apartment later," she said, her tone making it clear this was a command, not a suggestion. "No," I replied simply. "If you want to talk, call first and ask if you can visit. I won't open the door otherwise." Her eyes widened at my direct refusal. "This behavior needs to stop, Jelena. Your father and I have had enough." "So have I said, surprising myself with my calm. "That's why I'm setting boundaries." I left the gathering knowing the confrontation wasn't over, merely postponed. The drive home gave me time to prepare for what I knew would come next, but nothing, absolutely nothing, could have fully prepared me for my family's reaction to my newfound independence. I barely had time to change into comfortable clothes when the buzzer to my apartment rang. Looking through the peephole, I saw my parents and Nathan standing in the hallway, their faces a mixture of anger and grim determination. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door, but stood firmly in the doorway, making it clear I wasn't inviting them in. "May I help you?" I asked, trying desperately to keep my voice steady. "Don't be ridiculous, Jelena. Let us in. We need to talk," my father demanded, already trying to step forward. I held my ground. "I told Mom I wanted advance notice before visits. This isn't a good time." My mother's face crumpled into that hurt expression that had manipulated me for years. "After what you did at Patricia's party, you're going to turn us away at the door. Do you have any idea how embarrassed we were?" "You embarrassed yourselves," I replied, surprised at my own composure, by announcing renovation plans for my apartment without my consent. Nathan stepped forward, using his height to try to intimidate me. "The contractors are downstairs waiting. Dad paid a premium for them to start today. Are you really going to waste thousands of dollars because of your sudden need for independence?" I looked past them and saw 2 men in paint-splattered clothes standing awkwardly by the building's entrance, confirming Nathan's words. The realization that they had actually brought contractors without my agreement just strengthened my resolve. "Yes, I am. I never asked for renovations. I never agreed to renovations. Those men have no right to enter my home." My father's face reddened, a dangerous sign I recognized from childhood. "This isn't about rights, Jelena. This is about what's best for you. Your apartment looks like a thrift store. Exploded in it. What will people think?" "I don't care what people think." I shot back, the words finally free. "I care what I think, and I love my apartment exactly as it is." "This rebellion has gone on long enough," my father continued, his voice rising enough that a neighbor down the hall opened their door slightly. "If you're going to live independently, you need to do it properly. That means a professionally designed living space." "No, Dad. Living independently means making my own choices about my space, my time, and my life. It means not having to justify my decisions to you or anyone else." My mother's strategy shifted from hurt to tears. Another familiar tactic. "We just want to help you, Jelena. That's all we've ever wanted. Why are you pushing us away?" It's breaking my heart. In the past, those tears would have shattered my resolve. Today, they strengthened it. "Mom, I appreciate that you want to help, but real help would be respecting my wishes." "You don't know what you want," Nathan interjected, sneering. "You never have. Remember when you wanted to be a painter? How would that have paid your bills?" "I still paint, Nathan. My apartment is full of my artwork that you've apparently never noticed during your visits. And I pay my bills just fine with my marketing job. My father checked his watch impatiently. Enough of this nonsense. The contractors are on the clock. Let us in so they can start work. No, I said firmly. Please tell them to leave. I won't be responsible for their time since I never hired them. The door across the hall opened, and my neighbor Olivia stepped out, ostensibly to check her mail, but clearly responding to the escalating voices. Everything okay, Jelena? She asked, giving my family a pointed look. My father, ever conscious of appearances, lowered his voice. This is a family matter. It's fine, Olivia. My family was just leaving, I said, so grateful for her presence. We're not leaving until this has resolved, my mother insisted. Jelena, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. I am an adult with my own living space that I pay for. I decide what happens in it. My father's patience finally snapped. If you want to be so independent, perhaps you should be fully independent. No more family support. No safety net. If that's your choice, I replied, the words painful but so necessary, I accept it. You can't be serious, my mother gasped. George, she doesn't mean that. I do mean it. I would rather live without your financial support than with your constant control. Nathan stepped closer, his voice low and threatening. You're making a huge mistake, Jelena. You've always been dramatic, but this is taking it too far. The only mistake I made, I replied, standing my ground despite his intimidating stance, was not setting boundaries sooner. My father pulled out his wallet and removed a credit card with my name on it, one they'd given me for emergencies, but that I had deliberately not used since moving out. He held it up before tucking it back in his wallet. When you come to your senses, let us know. Until then, you're on your own. I already am, I said quietly. My mother made one last attempt, her voice breaking. Please, Jelena, let us help you. Let us in. Looking into her pleading eyes, I felt a momentary waver, the lifetime habit of giving in to keep the peace fighting against my newfound strength. But then I remembered. The photos she had shown everyone. The invasion of my privacy. The complete disregard for my wishes. I love you, Mom, but no. Please respect my decision. This isn't over, my father said ominously, finally turning to leave. We'll be back tomorrow, and I expect a more reasonable attitude. Don't come without calling first, I reminded them. And I expect you to respect my decision, even if you don't agree with it. Nathan was the last to leave, lingering in the doorway. You know they'll never give up, right? This little independence game will end eventually. It always does. This isn't a game, Nathan, I said, my voice thick with emotion. This is my life. After they finally left, I closed the door and leaned against it, my legs suddenly weak. The confrontation had drained me, but underneath the exhaustion, a fierce sense of pride bloomed. I had held my boundary. Despite everything. I heard most of that. Are you okay? Olivia asked, having emerged from her apartment again. I invited her in for tea, so grateful for a friendly presence. They've never taken no for an answer before, I told her. I don't think they'll start now. Then you need to be prepared, she said pragmatically. First, let's change your locks again. I know a locksmith who can come today. By evening, I had new locks installed, but the knot of anxiety in my stomach wouldn't ease. My father's parting words echoed in my mind. This isn't over. Knowing my family, I suspected they would escalate, not accept my boundary. I just didn't realize how far they would actually go. The pounding on my door jolted me awake at 6:01 in the morning. Disoriented, I fumbled for my phone to check the time, my heart pounding. Who could be at my door so early? The answer came in my mother's shrill voice, piercing through the wood. Jelena, open this door immediately. Fully awake now, I pulled on my robe and moved toward the door, my heart hammering against my ribs. Through the peephole, I saw them. My parents and Nathan, their faces set in grim, determined expressions. Jelena, we know you're in there. Open up. My father's commanding voice brought back a lifetime of automatic obedience, but I resisted. What are you doing here so early? I called through the door. I told you to call before coming over. This has gone far enough, my father replied. Your mother is worried sick about you. Open the door so we can talk properly. I'm fine and I'm not opening the door. Please leave and call me later if you want to talk. There was a murmured conversation. I couldn't quite hear it. Then my mother's voice again, this time with a quaver that sounded so rehearsed. Jelena, honey, we're concerned about your mental health. This behavior isn't like you. The implication was crystal clear and absolutely alarming. They were framing my independence as a mental health crisis. I'd heard of families using this tactic to regain control, and the realization that mine might go this far sent a cold, sharp chill through me. My mental health is fine. In fact, it's better than it's been in years. My therapist can confirm that. Therapist. My mother's genuine shock actually came through the door. You've been seeing a therapist without telling us? Before I could respond, I heard my father's impatient voice. This is ridiculous. Nathan, go down to the car and get the tool bag. The implication of his words hit me like a physical blow. They were planning to force their way in. Hands shaking, I picked up my phone and called 911, speaking quietly so they wouldn't hear me. I need police assistance. My family is threatening to break into my apartment. I explained to the dispatcher, giving my address. The dispatcher assured me officers would be there shortly and advised me to stay on the line. I kept the call active but muted my end so I could hear what was happening in the hallway. I can't believe it's come to this, I heard my mother say. What will the neighbors think? They'll think we're concerned parents checking on our daughter, my father replied. No one would blame us for that. Are you sure about this, Dad? Nathan's voice held a rare note of uncertainty. She's left us no choice. Break down the door. This is our son's apartment. The bizarre statement confused me until I realized he was referring to Nathan, creating a twisted narrative where this was somehow Nathan's place that I was occupying. The level of delusion absolutely shocked me. I heard Nathan's return, followed by the metallic sound of what could only be tools being handled. The dispatcher on the phone asked if I was still there, and I unmuted to confirm. They have tools. I think they're actually going to try to break in, I whispered, the reality of the situation hitting me fully. Officers are 3 minutes out, the dispatcher assured me. Stay on the line. I heard a scraping sound at the doorframe. They were actually doing it. Actually attempting to force entry into my home. A lifetime of compliance and fear battled with the newfound strength I had been building. In that moment, I made a decision. I had been recording the entire exchange on my phone as evidence, and I had something else they didn't expect. Yesterday, after their visit, I had contacted a lawyer friend who helped me file for an emergency temporary restraining order based on their harassment and threats. The paperwork had been processed remarkably quickly, thanks to my friend's connections, and the official documents had been delivered late last night. The sound of metal against my doorframe grew more insistent. I could hear my mother's anxious encouragements and my father's directions to Nathan about where to apply pressure with what I assumed was a crowbar. Making a split-second decision, I positioned myself to the side of the door, restraining order in one hand, phone recording in the other. In one swift motion, I unlocked the door and pulled it open, staying carefully to the side in case they tried to rush in. The sudden opening of the door caught them completely off guard. Nathan stumbled forward, a crowbar indeed in his hands. My father's face registered shock, then raw anger. But it was my mother's reaction that would stay with me forever. As her eyes fell on the documents in my hand and the phone, obviously recording their actions, her face transformed from righteous concern to pure, unadulterated horror. "What are you doing?" she shrieked, backing away as if I were threatening her, rather than the other way around. Defending my home from intruders, I replied calmly, holding up the restraining order. "This is a temporary restraining order prohibiting all of you from coming within 100 feet of me or my residence. You are currently in violation of that order, and you're being recorded attempting to break into my apartment with a crowbar." My father lunged forward, reaching for my phone. "Give me that. You're not recording anything." I stepped back inside my doorway. "Everything has already been uploaded to cloud storage. Breaking my phone won't delete the evidence." Nathan stood frozen, the crowbar still in his hand, his expression shifting between confusion and the dawning realization of the serious legal trouble they were in. "This is insane," my father sputtered. "We're your parents. We have every right to check on you." "No, you don't. Not by breaking down my door. Not after I've explicitly told you to leave. The elevator at the end of the hall dinged, and Officer Garcia stepped out, her hand resting cautiously near her weapon as she assessed the situation. The sight of Nathan holding a crowbar immediately put her on high alert. "Put that down slowly," she instructed Nathan, who complied immediately, placing the crowbar on the floor. "Officer, there's been a misunderstanding," my father began, slipping into the charming persona he used with authorities. "We're just concerned parents checking on our daughter." Officer Garcia looked to me for confirmation. I shook my head and held out the restraining order for her to inspect. I have a temporary restraining order against all three of them. They were attempting to break into my apartment after threatening to return yesterday when I refused to let them in. The officer reviewed the paperwork and nodded. "This appears to be a valid order. Do you have evidence of the break-in attempt?" I held up my phone. I recorded everything, including their statements about breaking down the door. What followed was surreal. The family that had controlled every single aspect of my life for 3 decades was temporarily detained in the hallway of my apartment building. Officer Garcia took statements from all of us and a second officer arrived. My neighbor Olivia emerged from her apartment, confirming she had witnessed yesterday's confrontation and heard this morning's disturbance. My parents' version painted me as unstable, claiming they were worried about my mental health after erratic behavior at a family gathering. Nathan backed their story, though he seemed increasingly uncomfortable as Officer Garcia questioned the necessity of a crowbar for a wellness check. "If you are concerned about her welfare, why not call for a wellness check from the police?" she asked reasonably. "We didn't want to embarrass her," my mother replied, the irony of her statement apparently lost on her as she stood in a public hallway, having just screamed and attempted to break down my door. As Officer Garcia spoke with my parents, the second officer pulled me aside. "Do you feel safe in your apartment? Is there somewhere else you can stay tonight?" "I feel safe here," I assured him. "This is my home, and I'm not leaving because of their behavior." After what seemed like hours, but was probably only 45 minutes, Officer Garcia informed my parents and Nathan that they would need to come to the station to give formal statements regarding the attempted break-in. The restraining order would be enforced, meaning they could not come near my apartment or workplace. "This is outrageous," my father protested. "We've done nothing wrong." "Sir, attempting to force entry into someone's residence with a crowbar is breaking and entering, restraining order or not," Officer Garcia explained patiently. "You're fortunate your daughter is willing to let the restraining order violation be your only consequence today." As they were escorted to the elevator, my mother turned back, tears streaming down her face. "How could you do this to us, Jelena? Your own family?" The question that had controlled me for years finally had no power. "I'm not doing anything to you," I said, my voice steady. "I'm protecting myself." After they left, I sat on my couch in stunned silence, the adrenaline slowly draining from my system. The morning sun filtered through my curtains, illuminating the apartment that had become worth fighting for. Not because of its physical attributes, but because it represented something far more precious, my right to make my own choices. Officer Garcia returned for additional details. "Family situations can be the most difficult," she said sympathetically. "Do you have support people you can talk to?" I thought of Olivia next door, of Dr. Morris, of friends I had reconnected with. "Yes, I do," I said. "I'm not alone." As she left, she handed me her card. "Call if they come back or contact you against the order. We take violations seriously." After she left, I walked through my apartment, touching the furniture I had chosen, looking at the artwork I had created, feeling the space that was undeniably mine. For the first time, I understood that the morning's events weren't just about an apartment. They were about claiming my life as my own. The days following the break-in attempt took on a surreal quality. I kept expecting to wake up and find it had all been a dream, that I had imagined standing up to my family so definitively. But the police report on my coffee table and the temporary restraining order posted on my refrigerator were tangible, undeniable reminders that everything had changed. The first 24 hours passed in relative quiet. Then my phone began lighting up with messages and calls, not from my immediate family, who were legally prohibited from contacting me, but from extended relatives who had been enlisted in the campaign to bring me back into the fold. Your mother is devastated, Jelena, Aunt Patricia said when I answered her call. She hasn't stopped crying since they came home from the police station. I'm sorry she's upset, I replied carefully, but they tried to break into my apartment with a crowbar. They were worried about you. George says you've been acting erratically, making wild accusations. He thinks you might need professional help. The character assassination had begun, just as Dr. Morris had warned me it might. I am getting professional help, Aunt Patricia. I've been seeing a therapist for months, and she's helping me establish healthy boundaries. Boundaries with your own parents. That's not how family works, Jelena. It's how healthy families work, I countered. And I'm not making accusations. I have recordings of everything that happened. Similar conversations played out with other relatives. Some, like Uncle David, were more receptive to my side of the story. I always thought George was too controlling, he admitted. But breaking and entering? That's taking it to another level. The family divide became clearer with each call. Those who had experienced my father's controlling nature themselves were more understanding. Those who benefited from their association with him, or who shared his authoritarian views, condemned my actions as ungrateful and rebellious. 3 days after the incident, I received an email from my father's attorney, Robert Clean, a man I had known since childhood as a family friend. The formal legal language couldn't disguise the implicit threat. They were considering legal action against me for defamation and false reporting, claiming I had misrepresented the situation to the police. I forwarded the email to my own attorney, Jessica Winters, who had helped me obtain the restraining order. Her response was immediate and reassuring. They have no case. You have recordings, witnesses, and police reports documenting their behavior. This is an intimidation tactic. She was right, of course. But knowing the legal threat was empty didn't make it less stressful. I had been raised to fear my father's disapproval, and that conditioning didn't disappear overnight. Each email notification made my heart race. Each unknown phone number triggered anxiety about what new pressure tactic they might be employing. A week after the incident, my brother Nathan contacted me through a mutual friend, requesting to meet at a neutral location. Against Jessica's advice, I agreed, choosing a busy coffee shop where I felt safe from both physical intimidation and potential scenes. Nathan looked tired when he arrived, his confident swagger temporarily subdued. He ordered coffee and sat across from me, studying my face as if looking for signs of the sister he recognized. You've really done it this time, he began, but without his usual condescension. Dad's had to call in favors all over town to contain this. Do you have any idea how this looks? Like parents who couldn't control their adult daughter, so they tried to break into her apartment, I suggested mildly. He winced. It wasn't supposed to go that way. They were genuinely worried about you. Were you worried too, Nathan? Is that why you brought a crowbar to my door at 6 in the morning? He had the grace to look ashamed. Dad insisted we needed to check on you. I didn't think it would go that far, but you know how he gets when he's made up his mind. I do know. That's why I got the restraining order. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. What's the endgame here, Jelena? You can't seriously think you can maintain this separation forever. We're family. The endgame is a relationship based on mutual respect rather than control. If that's not possible, then maybe separation is the only option. They'll never accept that, he warned. Mom's a wreck and Dad's obsessed with damage control. This is consuming their lives. Their reaction isn't my responsibility, I said, repeating a phrase Dr. Morris had taught me. They made choices that led to this situation. Nathan shook his head in disbelief. When did you get so cold? Setting boundaries isn't cold, Nathan. It's healthy. Maybe someday you'll set some of your own. The look he gave me was part anger, part confusion, and something else I couldn't quite identify. Maybe curiosity. We finished our coffee in uncomfortable silence before he stood to leave. They want you to drop the restraining order, he said finally. As a gesture of good faith. Good faith would be respecting my boundaries without legal enforcement, I replied. Until I see evidence of that, the order stays in place. As the weeks passed, the legal maneuvering continued. My parents had considerable resources and connections, which they deployed in increasingly concerning ways. I discovered they had contacted my employer, expressing concerns about my mental health that could impact my work performance. Fortunately, my direct supervisor, Maria, was more impressed by my professionalism than my parents' insinuations. "Your work speaks for itself," she assured me during a difficult conversation. "Whatever's happening in your personal life isn't affecting your performance." The financial consequences of my stand became apparent when I discovered my parents had been paying several of my subscription services and insurance premiums without my knowledge. These suddenly stopped, requiring me to quickly establish new accounts and payment methods. My health insurance, which had been part of a family plan, was canceled without notice, forcing me to navigate the complicated process of finding new coverage. The most painful consequence was the loss of relationships with family members who sided unquestioningly with my parents. Cousins I had grown up with stopped returning my calls. Holiday invitations that had once been obligatory were conspicuously absent. The family narrative being constructed painted me as unstable, ungrateful, and influenced by radical ideas from therapy. But for every relationship lost, I seemed to gain or strengthen another. Aunt Susan, my father's sister, who had always maintained a respectful distance from family drama, unexpectedly reached out with support. "Your father was always controlling, even as a child," she told me over lunch at a restaurant far from family haunts. "Our parents encouraged it in him, but discouraged it in me. What you're doing takes courage." My friendship with Olivia deepened, offering profound emotional understanding. Through her, I met others who had navigated difficult family dynamics and established healthier relationships, or, when necessary, distance. The temporary restraining order became permanent after a court hearing where the recordings of the break-in attempt were played. My parents and Nathan were present, represented by expensive attorneys who argued unsuccessfully that their actions were motivated by concern rather than control. The judge was unimpressed. Concern for an adult child's welfare does not justify attempted forcible entry into their residence, she stated firmly. The court finds sufficient evidence to grant a permanent restraining order. Leaving the courthouse, I felt a complex mixture of relief and deep, deep grief. The legal victory provided protection, but it also formalized the rupture in my family. As I walked to my car, I noticed my mother standing alone near the courthouse steps, my father and their attorney deep in conversations several yards away. For a moment, our eyes met, and I saw something unfamiliar in hers. Not anger, not manipulation, but confusion, as if she truly couldn't comprehend how we had reached this point. I looked away first, unable to bear the weight of that confusion. In that moment, I realized that my parents' controlling behavior wasn't just about power. It was about a fundamental inability to acknowledge my valid needs and rights. Their worldview simply couldn't accommodate my independence without interpreting it as outright rejection. The financial challenges of true independence proved significant. Without the safety net my family had provided, I needed to establish an emergency fund and plan more carefully for expenses. I picked up freelance marketing projects to supplement my income and learned to be more intentional about spending. These challenges were stressful, yes, but also incredibly empowering. Each bill paid with my own earnings was a confirmation of my capability, my strength. 6 months after the break-in attempt, I attended a support group for adults dealing with controlling family relationships, encouraged by Dr. Morris. Sharing my story with others who truly understood was healing in a way individual therapy alone couldn't provide. The group members recognized the manipulation tactics, the guilt induction, the threats disguised as concern. No one questioned why I couldn't just get along with my family or suggested I was overreacting. The hardest part, I told the group during one session, is grieving the relationship I wished I had, while setting boundaries with the relationship I actually have. Karen, a woman in her 50s who had been estranged from her parents for decades, nodded in understanding. That grief never completely goes away, Jelena, but it does change over time. It becomes less raw, more manageable. As the 1-year anniversary of my move to independence approached, I realized how much had changed, not just in my circumstances, but deep inside me. The constant anxiety that had been my companion since childhood had diminished. I made decisions without hearing my parents' critical voices in my head. I decorated my apartment, chose my clothes, and pursued interests without constantly wondering if they would meet with approval. I was becoming the person I might have been all along if I'd just been given the space to develop naturally. Not perfect, not always confident, but authentically myself. The journey continued to have painful moments, but I no longer questioned whether it was worth the cost. 18 months after the day my family tried to break down my door, my apartment truly became my sanctuary. The space that had sparked such conflict was now transformed, not by expensive designers my parents had tried to hire, but by my own evolving sense of what made me feel at home. My paintings hung on walls painted colors I had chosen. Plants thrived on my windowsills. Books I loved filled the shelves, without anyone telling me they were a waste of time. The legal battles had finally quieted. My parents had eventually accepted that their attempts to regain control through the courts were futile and expensive. The restraining order remained in place, though I had modified it to allow limited contact through approved channels, mainly email, which gave me the ability to set boundaries around when and how I engaged with them. My relationship with extended family had reached a new equilibrium. Some relatives, like Aunt Patricia, maintained polite but distant contact, carefully avoiding mention of the rift. Others, like Uncle David and Aunt Susan, had become stronger supports than ever before, offering the kind of family connection that nurtured rather than constrained. Holidays were spent with chosen family now, rather than out of obligation, a change that brought both sadness and relief. Nathan and I had established an uneasy truce. Our monthly coffee meetings were stilted at first, both of us unsure how to relate without our established patterns of golden child and scapegoat. Gradually, we found new conversation territory, discussing neutral topics like movies or books. During our last meeting, he had surprised me by admitting, "Sometimes I think you were right to leave. Dad's been even more controlling since you've been gone." The tiny seed of awareness in that statement gave me a flicker of hope that Nathan might someday examine his own relationship with our parents. I didn't push, knowing from experience that such realizations couldn't be forced. Professionally, I had found unexpected growth through independence. Without my father's influence dictating my career choices, I discovered I had talents and interests I had never been allowed to explore. The freelance marketing work I had taken on out of financial necessity had led to specialized projects in arts promotion, blending my creative and business skills in ways that felt authentic and truly fulfilling. My friendship with Olivia had deepened into something that felt more like family than just friendship. We had weekly dinner nights, held spare keys to each other's apartments, and provided the kind of mutual support I had always imagined healthy families shared. Through her, I had built connections with others who formed a true community of chosen family. Dating had taken on a new dimension as well. Without my parents' approval looming over potential relationships, I was free to discover what I truly wanted in a partner. After several casual relationships, I had been dating Dylan for 6 months, a kind, creative man who respected boundaries in a way that showed me what healthy love could actually look like. Therapy with Dr. Morris continued, though less frequently now. Our sessions focused less on crisis management and more on deeper healing, addressing the childhood patterns that still occasionally influenced my reactions to stress or conflict. Family estrangement comes with its own grief process, Dr. Morris explained during one session. You're grieving not just the relationship you had, but the one you wished you had. That's a complex loss. The grief she described came in waves. There were days when I missed the good moments with my family, the rare instances of connection and warmth that had kept me hoping for change for so many years. Mother's Day and Father's Day were particularly difficult, social media filled with celebrations of healthy parent-child relationships that highlighted the gaping absence in my life. But alongside the grief was immense growth. I was learning to parent myself in the ways my parents never had, providing the validation, support, and unconditional acceptance I had always craved. I celebrated my own achievements, comforted myself through difficulties, and gradually replaced the critical internal voices with kinder. The recordings of the break-in attempt were played. My parents and Nathan were present, represented by expensive attorneys who argued unsuccessfully that their actions were motivated by concern rather than control. The judge was unimpressed. Concern for an adult child's welfare does not justify attempted forcible entry into their residence, she stated firmly. The court finds sufficient evidence to grant a permanent restraining order. Leaving the courthouse, I felt a complex mixture of relief and deep, deep grief. The legal victory provided protection, but it also formalized the rupture in my family. As I walked to my car, I noticed my mother standing alone near the courthouse steps, my father and their attorney deep in conversations several yards away. For a moment, our eyes met, and I saw something unfamiliar in hers. Not anger, not manipulation, but confusion, as if she truly couldn't comprehend how we had reached this point. I looked away first, unable to bear the weight of that confusion. In that moment, I realized that my parents' controlling behavior wasn't just about power. It was about a fundamental inability to acknowledge my valid needs and rights. Their worldview simply couldn't accommodate my independence without interpreting it as outright rejection. The financial challenges of true independence proved significant. Without the safety net my family had provided, I needed to establish an emergency fund and plan more carefully for expenses. I picked up freelance marketing projects to supplement my income and learned to be more intentional about spending. These challenges were stressful, yes, but also incredibly empowering. Each bill paid with my own earnings was a confirmation of my capability, my strength. 6 months after the break-in attempt, I attended a support group for adults dealing with controlling family relationships, encouraged by Dr. Morris. Sharing my story with others who truly understood was healing in a way individual therapy alone couldn't provide. The group members recognized the manipulation tactics, the guilt induction, the threats disguised as concern. No one questioned why I couldn't just get along with my family or suggested I was overreacting. The hardest part, I told the group during one session, is grieving the relationship I wished I had, while setting boundaries with the relationship I actually have. Karen, a woman in her 50s who had been estranged from her parents for decades, nodded in understanding. That grief never completely goes away, Jelena, but it does change over time. It becomes less raw, more manageable. As the 1-year anniversary of my move to independence approached, I realized how much had changed, not just in my circumstances, but deep inside me. The constant anxiety that had been my companion since childhood had diminished. I made decisions without hearing my parents' critical voices in my head. I decorated my apartment, chose my clothes, and pursued interests without constantly wondering if they would meet with approval. I was becoming the person I might have been all along if I'd just been given the space to develop naturally. Not perfect, not always confident, but authentically myself. The journey continued to have painful moments, but I no longer questioned whether it was worth the cost. 18 months after the day my family tried to break down my door, my apartment truly became my sanctuary. The space that had sparked such conflict was now transformed, not by expensive designers my parents had tried to hire, but by my own evolving sense of what made me feel at home. My paintings hung on walls painted colors I had chosen. Plants thrived on my windowsills. Books I loved filled the shelves, without anyone telling me they were a waste of time. The legal battles had finally quieted. My parents had eventually accepted that their attempts to regain control through the courts were futile and expensive. The restraining order remained in place, though I had modified it to allow limited contact through approved channels, mainly email, which gave me the ability to set boundaries around when and how I engaged with them. My relationship with extended family had reached a new equilibrium. Some relatives, like Aunt Patricia, maintained polite but distant contact, carefully avoiding mention of the rift. Others, like Uncle David and Aunt Susan, had become stronger supports than ever before, offering the kind of family connection that nurtured rather than constrained. Holidays were spent with chosen family now, rather than out of obligation, a change that brought both sadness and relief. Nathan and I had established an uneasy truce. Our monthly coffee meetings were stilted at first, both of us unsure how to relate without our established patterns of golden child and scapegoat. Gradually, we found new conversation territory, discussing neutral topics like movies or books. During our last meeting, he had surprised me by admitting, "Sometimes I think you were right to leave. Dad's been even more controlling since you've been gone." The tiny seed of awareness in that statement gave me a flicker of hope that Nathan might someday examine his own relationship with our parents. I didn't push, knowing from experience that such realizations couldn't be forced. Professionally, I had found unexpected growth through independence. Without my father's influence dictating my career choices, I discovered I had talents and interests I had never been allowed to explore. The freelance marketing work I had taken on out of financial necessity had led to specialized projects in arts promotion, blending my creative and business skills in ways that felt authentic and truly fulfilling. My friendship with Olivia had deepened into something that felt more like family than just friendship. We had weekly dinner nights, held spare keys to each other's apartments, and provided the kind of mutual support I had always imagined healthy families shared. Through her, I had built connections with others who formed a true community of chosen family. Dating had taken on a new dimension as well. Without my parents' approval looming over potential relationships, I was free to discover what I truly wanted in a partner. After several casual relationships, I had been dating Dylan for 6 months, a kind, creative man who respected boundaries in a way that showed me what healthy love could actually look like. Therapy with Dr. Morris continued, though less frequently now. Our sessions focused less on crisis management and more on deeper healing, addressing the childhood patterns that still occasionally influenced my reactions to stress or conflict. Family estrangement comes with its own grief process, Dr. Morris explained during one session. You're grieving not just the relationship you had, but the one you wished you had. That's a complex loss. The grief she described came in waves. There were days when I missed the good moments with my family, the rare instances of connection and warmth that had kept me hoping for change for so many years. Mother's Day and Father's Day were particularly difficult, social media filled with celebrations of healthy parent-child relationships that highlighted the gaping absence in my life. But alongside the grief was immense growth. I was learning to parent myself in the ways my parents never had, providing the validation, support, and unconditional acceptance I had always craved. I celebrated my own achievements, comforted myself through difficulties, and gradually replaced the critical internal voices with kinder, more compassionate ones. The process of healing showed me that their controlling behavior had never actually been about love, even though they had framed it that way. Real love celebrates independence and growth. Real love respects boundaries and differences. Real love seeks connection without ownership. My experience had made me more aware of similar dynamics in others' lives. When my younger cousin Jamie reached out, confiding that she felt suffocated by family expectations, I was able to offer understanding without imposing solutions. I shared resources that had helped me and assured her that her feelings were valid, whatever path she chose. One unexpected area of healing came through my art. The paintings I created after the break-in attempt truly reflected my emotional journey, starting with dark, confined images and gradually opening to more light and space. A local gallery owner who purchased my work for a group show described it as a visual journey from confinement to freedom, without even knowing the personal story behind the evolution. The most profound lesson I learned through this entire journey was that setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's absolutely necessary for authentic relationships. Boundaries define where one person ends and another begins, creating the space for genuine connection rather than control or obligation. Far from destroying relationships, healthy boundaries actually make true intimacy possible. I also learned that healing isn't linear. There were days when a simple email from my mother could trigger old patterns of guilt and self-doubt. There were nights when I questioned whether complete estrangement would have been easier than the complex, limited contact I maintained. But each time I navigated these challenges, I grew stronger in my conviction that I had made the right choice for my well-being. The question of reconciliation remains open. Not the kind that would require me to surrender my independence and return to old patterns, but a new relationship, built on mutual respect. Is such transformation possible? I honestly don't know. Family systems resist change, and the longer patterns have been established, the harder they are to break. What I do know is that I am no longer willing to sacrifice my authenticity for approval. The price of admission to my life is respect for my boundaries. Those who can offer that, whether blood family or chosen family, are welcome. Those who cannot must remain at a safe distance, not as punishment, but as protection for the self I have worked so hard to reclaim. That morning, when my family tried to break down my door, it marked the end of one chapter and the exhilarating, terrifying beginning of another. What they saw in my hands that day was not just legal paperwork or a recording phone, it was my reclamation of a power they had never intended me to have. Their horror? It was the recognition that they could no longer control my narrative or my life. The journey since has been challenging, yes, but incredibly worthwhile, filled with difficult choices, but also unexpected joys. I am still discovering who I am outside of my family's expectations, still learning to trust my own voice after decades of having it silenced. But each day brings me closer to the person I was meant to be all along. Have you ever had to set really difficult boundaries with people you love? How did you navigate that challenging emotional terrain? I'd absolutely love to hear your stories and insights in the comments below. If my story resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe, and share it with others who might be on similar journeys toward independence and authentic living. Thank you for listening, and remember, your need for boundaries and respect is valid, always, even when others don't understand it.